Hey everybody, Gary Edelman, American Battlefield Trust, knocking off of my bucket list right now for the first time. Here I am at Glorieta Pass Battlefield, the Gettysburg of the West. So many other monikers go along with this particular battle, but this is known as the big deal fight in the extreme far west. It's the one that is a federal battlefield park here, and man, I was already surprised. I've seen pictures and everything like that, and the terrain, I mean, it used to be a lot more clear, but it is even more rugged than I expected. Even having seen the pictures, like all these places, you can't know about it till you actually come. But I need to back up. First of all, I hope you've already watched some of our Fort Craig and Valverde coverage, because this is part of the same 1862 New Mexico campaign, okay? And around this same time, this is going on in the winter and early spring of 1862. What else is going on around that time? You've got U.S. Grant capturing Forts Henry and Donelson, moving on toward Pittsburgh Landing and Destiny at Shiloh. You've got the Battle of Pea Ridge happening in March of 1862, and the Union making huge gains in the West and the Trans-Mississippi. You've got George McClellan moving his mighty Army of the Potomac over toward Richmond, trying to take it, from the Virginia Peninsula. He's going to be besieging Yorktown in April of 1862, and this is happening. It's spanning a long while because this is a massive campaign, not necessarily in the number of troops. You're talking about 7,000 on the combined sides or so, but this is a big movement for the Confederates. In general, or in summary, Confederate General Henry Hopkins Sibley is going to convince Jefferson Davis he can do a campaign. Sibley thinks he can move his force quickly up through New Mexico into Colorado, and he thinks he can get the minerals there, then turn west toward California, get a Pacific port. It's manifest destiny for the Confederacy there. It's not going to quite go that way, but he will start out well. You've got an advanced sort of movement by a guy named Baylor, who is declared or declares himself a territorial governor of New Mexico, which included, at the time, now Arizona as well. Baylor will still stay back and do his political thing, and Sibley moves forward. There's a Union force under Edward Canby at Fort Craig. Watch our other video for that. And they're going to clash at Valverde. The Confederates win, but the Yankees might win strategically a little bit. The Confederates just have to keep moving, and there's not a lot of supplies. They're going to be bedraggled by the time they get into Albuquerque and advance on Santa Fe, which is only about 15 miles from where we stand now. Sibley pauses at those two places. His men needed to refit, and he knew that there were Yankees on the move from Colorado, but Colorado's a ways away. It's 400 miles away. He didn't think he quite had anything to worry about. Now, on the Union side, you're going to have namely some people you really don't hear of before or after. Namely, you've got a guy named Gabriel Paul. Some of you might hear about him at Gettysburg, where he's going to be shot through both of his eyes, as a matter of fact, commanding a brigade on the first day's field. And he's in command at a fort that is about, 50 miles away from here, called Fort Union. This is the big fort. This is where they stockpile the munitions. This is where they have all of the foodstuffs and whatnot. And it is the large outpost fort to try to deal with this wild, untamed country here in the New Mexico territory. You can still go there today. We'll show you some B-roll from the place. Man, you have a Civil War era fort, and then one that is sort of started during the Civil War, a bigger one, and you have remnants from both. Really impressive stuff. And to understand this campaign, you really need to understand and visit Fort Union and Fort Craig. I can't stress that enough. They're key to both all the movements in this area. In any case, the Confederates, the Union soldiers in Colorado, you've got sort of a fiery minister, a mountain of a man, 6'4", 250 pounds, John Chivington, and he's a minister that carried a gun to the pulpit in case things got out of hand with these wild, hard-drinking, hard-fighting Colorado miners, the Pikes Peakers, and these guys are going to be organized into the 1st Colorado Volunteers. Some of those soldiers ended up making it, very few to Valverde. Others kind of make it to Santa Fe and try to put up a little fight, but most of them are still back there when they get the urgent call from Canby. Canby, way down at Fort Craig, might be able to move forward while these Coloradans move the other way and catch Sibley in a vice, okay? These Coloradans, under the command of a guy named John Slough or Slough, and they start moving. They've got about 400 miles to go, and they complete that march in 13 days. You can do the math on that. That's more than 30 miles every day. And when they got closer to Fort Union, where they were told that there was going to be, the Confederates were going to sack the place, and they knew if Fort Union was lost, a lot was lost. So they marched the last 92 miles in 13 hours. An unbelievable march. I don't know of another longer, more desperate march in a blizzard at times and through terrible terrain, and they made it to Fort Union just as the Confederates are getting ready to leave Santa Fe. Okay, so then that's going to bring the troops to this area. Now, this battlefield, it takes place over a 3-day period. They actually fight on 2 days. They fight on March 26th to the west of us, okay? So you got to know the main features here. There's a ranch. This is along the Santa Fe Trail. There's Johnson's Ranch. Then there's a canyon called Apache Canyon. Then there's Glorieta Pass near where we stand right now. And at Glorieta Pass, there's Pigeons Ranch. And you might be able to, if the cameraman, that's Justin Shaw behind the camera, were to stand up, he'd be able to see Pigeons Ranch. And you might be able to catch over my shoulder a rocky ridge called Sharpshooter's Ridge as well. So we're right near the kind of climax of the battlefield here. And if we go a little further over, we'd be at Kozlowski's Ranch, okay? So those are some of the features of this battlefield. In summary, on the 26th of March, 1862, they fight over near and at Apache Canyon, and on the 28th, they're gonna fight in this area. It's a little more complex than that, though. So the Confederates start marching up toward Apache Canyon. They're going to establish their supply base at Johnson's Ranch, and then start moving forward. But all of a sudden, here comes John Chivington. Some of these Coloradans, he's got some United States troops with him as well, got a cannon or two, I think, and they're gonna start pushing against the Confederates in Apache Canyon, and 1, 2, 3 different positions, the Union pushes them back upon their supplies at Johnson's Ranch. I don't think the Union got a good look at that point at Johnson's Ranch, but the Confederates have ordered up the rest of their men. They're marching up here from Albuquerque, they're marching up here from Santa Fe, and they're getting ready. And there's gonna be a whole other day really at this point where nothing happens. Both sides expected the other side to move, neither one did, so they kind of got ready for another fight. By this time, the Confederates, most of the Texas Mounted Infantry are on site. The Confederates have 3 cannons going on here, and they're going to start to push against the Union soldiers. Now, the day before, or 2 days before, the Union kind of were climbing the sides of Apache Canyon so that the Confederates couldn't outflank them, and they had the Confederates in a crossfire, shooting down from above, and it worked really well. And the Confederates are going to learn that lesson a little bit and try to employ some of those tactics against the Union the following, on the 28th. Now, one more thing, while we're in Apache Canyon, you, the members of the organization, of the American Battlefield Trust, were able to preserve something like a dozen acres at Apache Canyon, the only acreage actually preserved from the March 26th fight. It's now in the hands of the National Park Service, where it should be. Okay, but on this area, the park owns a substantial amount of land. We're on one of the walking trails right now, good wayside exhibits and whatnot, and the trust has been able to add, I think, another couple of acres to this battlefield as well, just west of Pigeons Ranch. Now, here comes the main day. The Confederates might have something like 2,000 soldiers or a little bit less than that. The Union might have just about as many, except they are going to send Chivington with 400 of them across a mesa. It's called Glorieta Mesa, also called Roe Mesa, and they're going to be marching. In other words, the battle is fought along the Santa Fe Trail. Chivington is going to march his 400 men across the mesa, hoping to get behind the Confederates while they're moving toward Glorieta Pass. Something else is going to happen, though, that he didn't expect, but throughout this battle, he's marching to the west to try to get behind the Confederates. In the meantime, the Southerners come and push the Union back. They climb some of the sides of the ridges. These rugged Texas Mounted Infantry begin to push against the Union soldiers. They fall back again. The Confederates do the same thing again, and this is happening all afternoon. This is a long fight, and eventually the Union will establish a line right where we stand right here, right at Sharpshooter's Ridge behind me above Pigeons Ranch. The Union comes up with a desperate movement with 7 cannons. Could you imagine moving cannons around terrain like this here? They're blasting away at the Southerners, but here they go. You got Major John, I think it's a Major John Shropshire, and he is he's a Kentuckian fighting with the Texas Mounted Infantry. He tries to outflank the Union soldiers, and he is shot, actually mortally wounded, I believe, right in the head, and he's going to fall on the battlefield near where the interstate is. See, now we stand between the interstate, I believe it's 25, and the old Santa Fe Trail, which is also Route 50 now, I believe, and we're kind of between them. I mean, they fought a lot of battles around transportation facilities because they had to get there somehow, and they tended to be important. The Union is holding out, okay, but they're about to break, and just as they're about to break and fall back further toward their supply base at Kozlowski's Ranch, that's when Chivington has discovered that at Johnson's Ranch, he's not finding the Confederate rear, he's finding all of the Confederate wagons for the entire campaign, and the Southerners have one cannon there and very few troops. They open up some shots on Chivington's men. Chivington's men get closer, creep up, shoot the cannoneers, and then they descend upon the camp. They absolutely burn all the wagons. I think they slaughter most of the mules there. And now the Confederates win their great victory here at Glorieta Pass, only to see smoke rising in their rear, and they eventually get word that all of their stuff is gone. Just like at Valverde, the Confederates have won a victory, tactical victory in a battle, and they are losing the campaign, and this was the last straw. At this very moment, the Southerners knew their campaign is over. They could no longer move on Fort Union. They didn't have any supplies left, and they turn around and head all the way back across New Mexico. This is a drive that takes hours and hours to do in your car. Imagine doing it as it's starting to get hotter and nastier with fewer, water holes because there had been a drought before this, and then here's Edward Canby actually coming up and, trying to catch him in a vise, which makes them add even more to their march. The Union has won. John Slough, or Slough, who took this grand gamble to come out here, thought it wouldn't work, and he thought he was going to get in trouble, so he said, resigns right away. He's eventually going to, go back to what he's good at, politics. He's going to be shot in a Santa Fe bar room, I think in 1867, by one of his political rivals. John Chivington will end up doing a whole lot of things, not all of them popular, in the Civil War. This was a rugged type of man. Gabriel Paul, like I said, will be blinded in both eyes at the Battle of Gettysburg. And you've got all of these Confederates who are going back, but they eventually fell back. They don't hold the field anymore. A lot of the dead are buried right around Pigeons Ranch, right in this area here. And it was not until 1987 that, receiving word, local history and whatnot, that there were a lot of burials still that hadn't been moved to the Santa Fe National Cemetery. They came upon bodies, and they eventually realized they were side by side. They saw their Confederate uniforms and accoutrement and whatnot. And one of the men was able to, using a wedding ring that was engraved, identify one of the soldiers. Another one was identified using a wound that was described by a guy named Peticolas, who had been at Valverde and at Glorieta Pass. Another guy threw a distinctive wound in the top of his head, and Major Shropshire. Because of the accounts left behind, they found those bodies, and a total of 31 Confederates, or 32. All but one were moved to the Santa Fe National Cemetery. Not common to have Union and Confederate soldiers buried together or even near each other in the same national cemetery. We'll try to show you some B-roll of some of that. And Shropshire himself was moved back to his home state of Kentucky. This was all happening in the early 90s by the time they actually moved them. So there is so much more to this story. I would encourage you all, you know I'm a military guy mostly, but the story of what's going on with the soldiers' wives and the Hispanos and the Native Americans around here, and how this whole war, the Indian Wars and the Civil Wars, collide out here, is beautifully told in The Three-Quartered War by my friend Megan Kate Nelson. I would encourage you to check out this book if that is of interest to you. And Edward Canby's wife, who was captured, so to speak, by the Confederates at Santa Fe, and how she was well treated and she treated them well in turn afterward. It just adds such a different layer to the story, but this is insufficient. You have to put this on your bucket list. Go to Fort Craig and Fort Union, come to Glorieta Pass, and if you can make it, we talked about it in the other video, try to get to Valverde as well. It's been eye-opening for me. We appreciate all the support you've provided in helping us to preserve some of this critical battlefield here. Thanks to Justin Shaw for filming behind the camera here, and thanks to you all for supporting battlefield preservation and education.
Hello, I'm Trace Atkins. To stay up to date on all the latest and coolest videos, please subscribe to the Trust YouTube channel. Preserve, educate, inspire.